Lepo pozdravljeni. Dela? Lepo pozdravljeni. Ne dela? Daj. Spoštovani. Ja? Spoštovani rektor Univerze v Ljubljani, profesor dr. Spoštovani prorektor Univerze v Ljubljani, profesor dr. Matjaž Kranjc. Spoštovani prorektor Univerze v Mariboru, profesor dr. Zoran Ren. Spoštovani cenjeni visoki gostje, spoštovani udeleženci in udeleženke konference, spoštovani kolegi in kolegice. V čast mi je, da vas lahko pozdravim na mednarodni konferenci o odprti znanosti, ki jo Filozofska fakulteta v sklopu 10. sejma akademske knjige Liberak organizira v sodelovanju z Univerzo v Ljubljani kot partnerico Open Air Advance. Dobrodošli tudi vsi tisti, ki nas spremljate v živo preko spleta. Ker gre za mednarodno srečanje, bom nadaljevala v angleščini. Dear Rector of the University of Ljubljana, Professor Igor Papič, Dear Vice Rector of the University of Ljubljana, Professor Matjaž Kranjc, Dear Vice Rector of the University of Maribor, Professor Zoran Ren, dear distinguished guests, dear participants, dear professors, dear colleagues. It is with great pleasure and honor to welcome you to the International Conference on Open Science in the Faculty of Arts in Ljubljana. This international gathering is organized by our faculty within the framework of the 10th Academic Book Fair Liberak and by the University of Ljubljana as a partner of Open Air Advance. A warm welcome also to all of you who are joining us live online. First, I would like to ask Professor Dr. Roman Kuhar, Dean of the Faculty of Arts of the University of Ljubljana, to say a few words. Please.
Spoštovani rektor, spoštovana prorektorja, cenjeni gosti, drage kolegice in kolegi, študentke in študenti. Dobrodošli na Filozofski fakulteti na konferenci o odprti znanosti, ki jo organiziramo v okviru letošnjega Liberaka, sejma akademske knjige, ki letos poteka 10. Z njim pa zaznamujemo tudi 10-krat starejšo obletnico, 100-letnico Filozofske fakultete in Univerze v Ljubljani. Ker je današnje srečanje mednarodno, dovolite, da nadaljujem v angleščini. Their distinguished guests, their professors, their colleagues and students, welcome to the Faculty of Arts, University of Ljubljana. Welcome to the 10th edition of the academic book fair, Liberak. It was exactly 1 year ago that the Faculty of Arts held an international gathering about open access in the humanities. And I'm very happy that today we will continue this debate, not focusing only on humanities, but rather science in general. Since last year, we have seen an important progress in open access movement in Europe. On September the 4th, 2018, Science Europe launched the so-called Plan S, an initiative for open access science publishing. It is an initiative of Coalition S, a consortium launched by national research agencies and founders from 12 European countries, including Slovenia. In fact, the Plan S is in line with the Slovenian national strategy of open access to scientific publications and research data adopted in 2015, and determining that each beneficiary has to ensure open access to all peer-reviewed scientific publications that refer to the results from the nationally funded research. The Plan S, therefore, requires scientists and researchers who benefit from the state-funded research organizations and institutions to publish their work in open repositories or in journals that are available to all. For some, particularly for publishing houses, such a plan is seen as radical. So it comes as no surprise that S in the Plan S allegedly stands for shock. But that is exactly what we need, a shock to the system where publishers make enormous profits for only organizing a peer review process, which is done for free by all of us, researchers and professors, and for publishing the articles that are written by us, the researchers. Let me give you just one example. Last year, Slovenian researchers published 1,300 scientific articles in journals owned by the Elsevier. For each article Elsevier publishes in one of their 2,500 journals, their profit is approximately 3,000 euros. In other words, Elsevier profited nearly 4 million euros last year only by the scientific production of the Slovenian researchers. So we should not be surprised that the spokesman for Elsevier, when asked about the Plan S, said, "If you think that information should be free of charge, go to Wikipedia." Of course, it is not only the publishing houses that might have some reservations about the Plan S, but also researchers themselves. They point out that while the Plan S is targeting the publishers, it is not sufficiently considering the consequences for the researchers. Forbidding researchers from publishing in existing subscription journals might have unwanted side effects. For example, if the rest of the world does not join in, Plan S will hamper internationalization and collaborations between researchers from Plan S and non-Plan S countries. Furthermore, Plan S would ban researchers from publishing in about 85% of scientific journals, as only 15% of journals currently publish work immediately as open access. There is also a danger that the financial burden of paying for the articles will be simply transferred from the readers to the authors, which means that research communities with less money will not be able to afford publishing in open access. There are, of course, other burning issues related to open access and scientific production. One of them is the assessment of our research and the publish or perish scientific culture. There are numerous initiatives to stop measuring the quality of our work by journal-based metrics, such as journal impact factors. Among them is San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, DORA, which explains that the journal impact factor was originally created as a tool to help librarians identify journals to purchase and not as a measure of the scientific quality of research in the article. The bottom line is the science should serve the humankind, not the capital. It should be measured by its quality, not by its impact factor. And all these are important challenges that we need to address over and over again. I hope this conference will be one such platform. I wish you a thought-provoking debate and a pleasant stay at the Faculty of Arts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to ask Professor Zoran Stančić, head of the European Commission's representation in Slovenia, to also say a few words. Please, the floor is yours.
Hvala lepa. Spoštovani rektor, prorektorja, spoštovani predstavniki vlade, dekan, direktor agencije. Veliko veselje mi je, da ste me povabili na današnjo konferenco, ki mi na nek način spominja tudi na začetek moje poklicne poti, ko sem tukaj delal prvič v leta 86 na prvem nadstropju. I'd like also to apologize to our guest from Brussels because I'll speak in Slovene language, because in my speech there is nothing new for you, but there are some specific messages which I would like to pass in Slovene language. So with this excuse I'll continue in Slovenian language. Gospe in gospodje, najprej bi v imenu Evropske komisije rad pozdravil odločitev, da pripravite konferenco o odprti znanosti na Filozofski fakulteti v Ljubljani, vendar pa naj vas naslov konference, konferenca Odprta znanost, ne zavede. Ne gre samo za odprto znanost, gre za to, da moramo to konferenco in spremembe, ki se dogajajo na področju odprte znanosti, razumeti v širšem kontekstu. V kontekstu velikih sprememb, ki se dogajajo v znanosti, s ciljem napredka v znanosti in spodbujanja sodelovanja. Tako da glavni cilj te konference seveda je pogovor o odprti znanosti, vendar pa morate razumeti, da je to razumeti to konferenco v tem širšem kontekstu, ki naslavlja nujne potrebne spremembe v slovenski, svetovni znanosti, ki jih moramo narediti, kljub temu, da so koraki zahtevni in dostikrat rezultati tudi nepredvidljivi. O odprtem dostopu tako do publikacij, kot tudi do podatkov boste izvedeli bistveno več od mojih kolegov iz Bruslja. Jaz bi pa rad pravzaprav predstavil celoten ta kontekst tega pogovora v okviru evropskega semestra. Za vas verjetno je evropski semester nekaj, kar se dogaja po strani, nekaj, kar niti ni imelo do sedaj velikega fokusa na raziskavah in inovacijah, vendar pa v poročilu, ki smo ga v Evropski komisiji objavili konec februarja meseca, je specifično poglavje, ki naslavlja točno te izzive. Izzive, s katerimi se mora Slovenija soočiti, če želi na celotnem, torej na področju ne samo raziskav in inovacij, vendar pa celotnega razvoja družbe napredovati. Jasno smo postavili nekaj ključnih podatkov, in sicer, da je Slovenija glede na rezultate indeksa inovacijske uspešnosti ocenjena kot močna inovatorka, vendar je pa rast v zadnjih nekaj let relativno zmeren. Hkrati smo jasno napisali, da so zmanjšanje in tudi neučinkoviti odhodki oziroma investicija v raziskave in razvoj v javnem sektorju velik problem za državo. Glede intenzivnosti vlaganja v raziskave in inovacije Slovenija še zdaleč ne dosega tistih ciljev, ki smo si jih zastavili, torej 3% vlaganja v raziskave, bruto domačega proizvoda, vlaganja v raziskave in inovacije. Hkrati pa ni pomembno zgolj to, koliko se vlaga v raziskave in inovacije, ampak tudi kako se vlaga v raziskave in inovacije. Raziskovalni inovativni sistem inovacijski sistem v Sloveniji je po naših ocenah neučinkovit. Vidimo tudi recimo, da Slovenija zaostaja za povprečjem Evropske unije glede mednarodno citiranih objav, sedaj nekje na 17. mestu. Število, ne glede na to, da pravzaprav je pa število mednarodnih soobjav, torej skupaj z drugimi avtorji, je pa pravzaprav nad evropskim povprečjem v Sloveniji. Rad bi opozoril še na problem tega, da imamo v Sloveniji relativno velik zaostanek glede vlaganja v mlade kadre. Število mladih raziskovalcev nazaduje oziroma pravzaprav ne napreduje tako, kot bi bilo potrebno. Veste, da je leta 2017 javna agencija zagotovila sredstva za 840 mladih doktorskih raziskovalcev, kar je v redu, vendar pa verjetno premalo v primerjavi s tistim, kakšna je potreba. Rad bi opozoril tudi na to, da je slovenska znanost, ne glede na to, da so podatki glede mednarodnih soobjav relativno dobri, da je še vedno preveč zaprta. Poglejte recimo povprečje v OECD državah glede števila podoktorskih študentov v raziskovalnih organizacijah, torej univerzah, inštitutih, je okoli 25% tujih študentov. V Sloveniji je ta številka torej 9%, kar pomeni, da Slovenija bistveno zaostaja za tem, koliko tujih študentov, podoktorskih študentov ali pa doktorskih študentov privabi v državo. To seveda vpliva tudi na gospodarstvo. Delež inovativnih podjetij v Sloveniji zaostaja za povprečjem Evropske unije. V obdobju 2014 do 16 je 40% vseh podjetij Slovenije opravljalo inovacijske dejavnosti, vendar je pa to 6% padec v primerjavi z obdobjem 2012 do 2014. Podobno imamo tudi pri malih srednjih podjetjih. Zgolj slabih 20% malih srednjih podjetij sodeluje z raziskovalnimi inštituti, fakultetami, univerzami, kar je pravzaprav močno pod povprečjem. Tudi, bodimo iskreni, dostikrat njihove raziskave in inovacije se osredotočajo na zelo ozek segment, dostikrat recimo rutinske postopke, kot so nadzor kakovosti, preizkušanje in podobno. Skratka, v tem kontekstu izzivov, s katerimi se sooča Slovenija, in izzivov, s katerimi se sooča tudi celotna Evropska unija, je potrebno razumeti to konferenco. Sporočilo, ki bi ga zdaj na začetku rad predal, je to, da z odprto znanostjo, s prehodom na odprto znanostjo se seveda bomo soočili z izzivi, s problemi. Določene usmeritve boste skupaj kreirali v Sloveniji na mednarodni ravni, vendar je pa zelo pomembno, da raziskovalne inštitucije, univerza kot inštitucija znanja prevzame logiko, poglede odprte znanosti tudi v svoje notranje dokumente in recimo s konkretnim upoštevanjem teh razvoja na tem področju spremeni tudi način notranjega delovanja. Prepričan sem, gospe in gospodje, torej, da bomo s temi spremembami zagotovili napredek v znanosti, poglobili sodelovanje znotraj raziskovalnih organizacij, univerz in tudi navzven z gospodarstvom in mednarodno skupnostjo in tudi prek tega zagotovili odličnost slovenske znanosti. Hvala lepa in želim vam uspešno konferenco.
Thank you very much. Before we begin with the first session, allow me to explain some formalities. As stated in the agenda, the first part of the conference will last till 12, I think, because we are running a little late, or 11:50. Then we will have a 30-minute coffee break. And at 12:15, 12:20, we begin with the second part of the conference, which is supposed to last till exactly 2 o'clock, more or less, because some of our guest speakers have planes to catch. So I kindly ask in advance for punctuality. As you can see, there will be 4 sessions. Each session lasts 45 minutes, and the last 5 to 10 minutes, it depends, of each session are supposed to be reserved for the panel discussion. I will keep you informed about the time if necessary. So let us begin with the first session, which is called Open Science in the European Research Area. I'm pleased to introduce the chair of the session, Dr. Tomasz Boch, Director General of the Science Directorate at the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport, which also covers open science. And I'm especially delighted that the main speaker of this session is Dr. René von Schomburg from the European Commission, Directorate General for Research and Innovation, where he's now leading a team on open science. The floor is yours.
Hvala lepa, dobro jutro, dober dan tudi v imenu Ministrstva za izobraževanje, znanost in šport. Moram reči, da že po uvodnih nagovorih je kar nekaj stvari, na katere bi se človek želel referirati oziroma nekako diskutirati, ker mislim, da gremo vsi v isto smer, pa vendar, da nas kot v funkciji vodje panela se bom tega pač moral vzdržati, pa vendar nekaj poudarkov pa vseeno. Preden začnem, morda samo kratka predstavitev našega prvega gosta oziroma uvodničarja. Profesor René von Schomburg je specialist z področja znanstvenih in tehnoloških študij ter filozof. Je soavtor ali avtor več kot 14 monografij na Univerzi Twente na Nizozemskem, je doktoriral z področja znanstvenih in tehnoloških študij in pa na Goethe Univerzi v Frankfurtu na Majni, pa z področja filozofije. V letu 2007 je bil štipendist Evropske unije na George Mason University v ZDA, od leta 1998 pa sodeluje z Evropsko komisijo, z direktoratom za raziskave in inovacije, ter je trenutno vodja skupine, ki se ukvarja z odprto znanostjo. But before we start, I would just like to say a few words about the open science in relation with our Ministry of Education, Science and Sport. First of all, we are all fully aware that open science will change the research and also policy environment not only in Slovenia, but in Europe and also globally. And not only it's a great difference for researchers, it's a difference or the change of paradigm for users of research results, for policymakers, for financiers, also for public, and I would say for public perception of science, inclusion of public and so on into different processes. What we are doing relating to the open science in Slovenia, many things will be discussed today, many processes already started will be discussed as well, but from the point of view of the ministry, I would just like to say two important things. First of all, Slovenia was and still is a strong supporter of open science processes which are actually going on in the European level, in the Council in relation to the Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020. The second thing which I believe is important to say is that Slovenia strongly supports open science also from the national perspective. We are at the moment in the process of preparing a new law related to science, to research, and open science is an important part of this document, and we believe that together with the research community we'll be able to finalize the proposal and adopt actually all the necessary framework conditions for full implementation of open science principles in Slovenia. Already mentioned at the beginning, there is an action plan related to open access and open access to the research publications and research data, and also action plan related to this, and as we follow the process in Slovenia, as Dr. Stančić said at the beginning, there are many challenges. There are many things which sees from large perspective as obstacles, but actually we believe at the ministry, together with the research community, that we are able to overcome these obstacles and actually do the research framework different as it is at the moment, and actually put science and research and innovation in the center of core activities, not only of researchers, but also of society. I will stop in this point, and actually I would like to introduce our guest to present us the open science concept and the open science perspective as developed and seen by the European Commission. And once again, thank you very much to all the organizers for organizing this excellent event, and looking forward for good results and actually fruitful discussion. Thank you. So the floor is yours. As already introduced, we have about half an hour for your introduction, and after that about 5 to 10 minutes for general questions, and actually I hope after that will be a discussion during the coffee break. So please, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be again in Slovenia. Thank you for the organizers. Thank you, Rector, for being here with us to discuss open science. I thank also Slovenia, of course, for the good support of open science policies. What I will do in the coming 30 minutes is to give, since, by the way, congratulations, 100 years anniversary. I will give also something of a history. It's not 100 years, but 10 years of open science policies, how they gradually evolved in Europe. So I will also start with why we actually do open science. It sounds a little bit strange, but I think it's good to make a step back sometimes and to see the overall rationale of what it's actually about. Now, let me see. So what is open science? I made a very short definition. There is no formal definition at the Commission or in Europe. But you can see this as the rationale. That's sharing data and knowledge as early as possible in open collaboration with all relevant knowledge actors. So this is actually a very short rationale. This is actually my definition. It's not supported by Juncker or something, but it does give the rationale of how we understand open science also at the European level. And if you look to this definition, which looks maybe simple, it has two components. First, it has the most visible aspect of it talks about open outputs of science, and this is where we discuss open access to policies, open access to publications, data, and so on. But one should also not forget that there is an input for open science. This is a little bit under-highlighted in the current discussion, and that's about how we actually use knowledge in the research process. And as the definition actually already says, open science and action is very often sharing data and knowledge prior to publication. In a certain way, although we talk a lot about open access nowadays to publications, open science actually relativizes the importance of publications, because there are other open outputs of science, other dimensions of science which become important, and this opens a whole new spectrum on which we are now actually in the middle of discussion. It leads to discussions on other ways of research assessment, other ways of rewarding scientific activities as such. So this is why I just made a step back to put this on the forefront. Now, this is actually also the concept we used in 2014, it was, when we were challenged in the House why actually we want open science. What is now so good about open science? And I got three arguments. First, the analysis is that open science will make science more efficient. Why is that? Because if you work in an open environment, you can share your resources, you identify research projects of other people which you actually planned yourself, so in a certain way it avoids duplication of research, it becomes more traceable what you do, and you can share it with others, and you can share your resources, so in the end science as a system becomes more efficient. The other argument is that science, and this is not an unimportant issue nowadays. A lot talk about that science is in crisis because our data are not reproducible. The former editor of Nature one time told me that 60% of the articles published in Nature have data underlying which cannot be reproduced by others. So this looks if you take it one step back and think, okay, I have only a high school education of science, then you would think, well, they only publish crap, because if you can reproduce it, it's then science. Okay, it's not like that, but there is an issue here. And of course, open science will make science more reliable because it provides better verification if you do it in an open environment, and there are more scientists engaged in this verification process. Now, the third argument is that, and this is of course one of the topics of our framework program of the Commission, trying to address science, trying to address the societal challenges like food security, climate change, etc. with science, and making science, in other words, more responsive to societal challenges. This is also something which you can expect, that a more open science will become more responsive to those societal demands, less to internal scientific affairs. So these were three major arguments. Of course, there are also other arguments for our open science, but then we had the problem we could not prove it. It's just a logical argument. And this is why we set up a public consultation to share this diagnosis across Europe with all stakeholders, organizations, scientists. And actually, in that process, we got a sort of confirmation that this diagnosis that we should do open science for those reasons is a good justification for doing open science. Now, what this now means is that we, after this public consultation, we set up a European, what we call now a European open science agenda, which actually had 5 policy lines. And these 5 were, one was on open access to publications and data. The second one was changing the rewards in its incentive system. The third was infrastructure. We had to have more open infrastructures. This is now translated into what you probably now are aware of the European Open Science Cloud. And then we had some other issues relating to science, or open science, making it more embedded in the societal context, and analyzing the research assessment context of open science. Now, I will, on these 5 policy lines, eventually, in 2015, we got 8 policy priorities, which were the so-called 8 open science ambitions of our Commissioner Moedas, who took office in 2015. Now, the first 4 of these 8 policy priorities, derived from this European Open Science Policy Agenda, are related to the use and management of research results. First is to have an agenda for what we call now fair data, so making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So, secondly, the European Open Science Cloud. As I mentioned, it was a large majority of our stakeholders really called for a more open data infrastructure. Third, we need alternative indicators. The current system, it was already referred to in the introduction. The journal impact factor is jeopardizing open science activities. It does not reflect the real merit and the quality of research done. And fourth, we wanted to have an outlook on how scholarly communication would evolve till 2030. So these were the 4 priorities around the use and management of research. We had also 4 priorities which relates to aligning the research partners. I think the most important and now the most difficult one to tackle, and still high on the agenda now, is changing the rewards and incentive system. I will come back to that in detail later. And then we have 3 other issues. Science skills. There's a lot of open science, especially in the data, as open science is also encompassing a ever more data-driven science. We need more skills in education around open science, and universities need to develop curricula to respond to the ever-growing demand of having more data scientists available. Now, citizen science is also an important topic. It will be more dominant in the next framework program, Horizon Europe, where we try to involve citizens actively in research or try to involve them in setting research agendas. In other words, to acknowledge that even citizens or other knowledge producers can produce quality knowledge and has to be acknowledged as such. So these are the 8 priorities we had back in 2015, on which we made step-for-step progress over the last years. I will give a very short overview now where we are, and then I will dive into the 8 priorities. So on open access, there we have already a long history. In fact, we started with it when it comes to publications already back in 2008. But in 2014, with the program Horizon 2020, open access became mandatory. And in 2016, the European Council adopted a policy objective to have immediate open access by 2020 in Europe. So that also became a basis for our former Director General to launch Plan S. And what we also currently have in mind is actually to open an open research platform for the Commission to enable scientists who participate in our framework program to publish their preprints online, etc. So to provide an open environment for research publications. Now, for open data, it started a little bit later. Open data became a default option in 2017, but in the new framework program, it will also be mandatory in association with having the data in the form of fair data as far as possible. Now, the European Open Science Cloud, I already mentioned, we started immediately after the consultation with an initiative under the Digital Single Market. The European Open Science Cloud was launched last year, already in 2018. The Commission has done, so to speak, its work on that. It's now more in the hands of member states who have to take this over, this initiative, and make it work in Europe. Okay, so on indicators, we are still in the very initial phase, because everybody knows that we want to have other indicators, but nobody knows exactly what the others then are. This is a very shortcut of the discussion at the moment, but I think that's not unfair to say. For citizen science, we make advances, notably in a new framework program, to have it as a rewardable practice. And we have established what we call the European Open Science Policy Platform in 2016. And this platform is a platform of 25 major European stakeholders. There are 5 university associations in it. There are research organizations in it, library organizations, publishers, and so on, with the idea that open science, when it evolves, it has to be supported by all these stakeholders in a mutual responsive way. I mean, the publishers have to respond to what the universities do if they change their research assessment system. Funders have to adapt, will make changes to make open science more fundable. And you know, so all these stakeholders, of course, have to react to each other and have to ideally have a basis on the core principles of open science to make open science work. So we started with that in 2016. The platform made its recommendations 2 years later at the May Competitiveness Council in last year. And now we are actually in the stage to work with the stakeholders to alternative rewards and incentive system. This is a very difficult process, so this goes, of course, much slower than one would hope, but I think this is the only way to do it. This is the platform now in a nutshell. So, as I said, the major challenge is now changing the rewards and incentive system. You can see from the early examples we have that it matters quite a lot. For example, the University of Liège in Belgium made already a couple of years ago it mandatory for all its researchers to put the publications they make at the university available in an open repository. And that would, if they would not do that, then they would not be entitled to promotion. And if you do such a thing, then you see immediately that the researchers now at that university are completely at ease with it, but then publications in Nature and so on becomes immediately less important. You see, so if universities take the step to change the reward system, it immediately has an impact on the other actors in the field. And you see it as a nice example of how open science actually effectively can evolve. Now, this is the type of stuff we will be working on in the coming years. Now, fair data. So now the 8 priorities in a short fashion. I'm aware of the 30 minutes, so please warn me where I am. I'm not there with one of your. Okay, so when it comes to fair data, the main achievements are, of course, that the launch of the European Open Science Cloud already last year in November under the Austrian presidency. And now we are more in an implementation phase. We have Ingrid with us, who is coordinator of a project. This is one of the things, of course, we had to launch under our current program, already starting a couple of years ago, a number of projects which were either pilots for the cloud or to work on particular elements of the cloud. One issue which is very important is, of course, how to develop fair data. So this is all in our program. It's now in an implementation phase. It's now, of course, in the hands of people who has to do it. So the European Open Science Clouds, I already mentioned in detail. I will not go in more detail than that right now. So on indicators, we have produced, in most of the cases of these 8 priorities, by the way, we have produced expert group reports. These are 2 expert groups I have been managed the last few years on indicators. We initially had a report on what was that called all metrics, but we soon discovered that any metrics you have is actually problematic. To make it actually sure that if you want to measure something for such like research quality or excellence, then you always measure something else. You don't measure quality directly. It's actually not possible to do that. So there was very quickly also a call, and I think this is more or less now the consensus in the field, that we should have a qualitative assessment in association maybe with quantitative indicators, but it can never be exclusively quantitative. A second expert group report, which is about to appear on our website, I think it will be out mid-June, which has a more detailed approach on how we can develop indicators which are specific for supporting open science activities. The problem which we face here is that indicators for one discipline is not the same as for others. For the historians or for biochemists, you cannot use the same indicators. So they have tried to take this into account. And most of all, if you use indicators and you don't have an open data infrastructure, your indicators are always bad. So we have to be reflexive about this. And we have to work in a context where data are not open. Most of the data are proprietary, and they can only be accessed if you pay for it. So this means that we still have to work forward in such a context. Ultimately, when we have a European open science cloud and our data infrastructure is open, then also our research assessment and indicators will become better and more reliable. Now, on open access, for the Commission, open access is actually an old thing, since for us this was already mandatory since long. Our ex-Director General, Robert Jan Smits, thought, well, I mean, it's not, Commission leading by example is not sufficient, we have to give it a push. So he proposed this Plan S, which was then launched by, as already mentioned in the introduction, by Science Europe, in association with now 15 research councils, if I have the number correctly in my head, and there are also some private charities which have joined the initiative, like the Bill Gates Foundation and Wellcome Trust. That initiative is, although it was proposed by Robert Jan Smits as an advisor, it's not a Commission initiative. And one should see that it's an initiative of those councils, coordinated by Science Europe. And what they propose is very much what the Commission already long had in place, and what also for Horizon Europe is already prepared. So in the end, Commission is not part of Plan S, but is a supporter of Plan S, and obviously we will align with it. So rewards and skills. I think we desperately need another rewards and incentive system for science. Currently, if people want to engage with open science, it can be bad for their career. If you ask a scientist, look, you have wonderful data there, don't you think it's good for the scientific system to share your data immediately? Then the scientist would say, yes, that's a very good idea. And then if you ask, are you going to do it? And they say, no, I'm not going to do it because I first want to publish it. And this will take some time. So this is the dilemma, especially for young scientists. It will be a challenge because it's for the sake of science better to share, but in the sake of your career, it's better not to do it. If you have this dilemma, then obviously, if I would be a young scientist, then I would also not do it. I'm a proponent of open science, but it jeopardizes your career. So this is where we are right now, and this is what needs a desperate change if we want to make science really better. So on research integrity, this is an issue which has been already addressed by ALEA, which is a consortium of academies of science around the world, and especially in Europe this has been translated as an obligation in the grant agreement. And this has taken actually a long time. I think these people have been busy 20 years to develop a European Code of Conduct. But even if it takes long, open science was not really, it's touched upon, but it's not really aligned with it. So we hope actually to have a further elaboration on it in terms of how research integrity in a much broader context of open science can be understood. So where issues like reproducibility and so on will also be taken into account. Okay, so citizen science, I already mentioned it. The sort of objective is just to make citizen science, where science is done by citizens, also a rewardable and fundable practice. We have, and this may be for those who are new to the subject matter, an interesting instrument to look at. We have on our website a so-called Open Science Monitor. It gives you some quantitative data on how the different policies and also the different dimensions of open science have developed over time. So how many publications appear in open access, how many data has been shared, how many researchers work in open collaborative networks, and so on. And there you can also already see that there has been quite exponential rise in doing open science over a couple of years. But currently the curve is going to flatten a little bit. And why is that? That's of course the rewards and incentive system. Because the scientists themselves are very often motivated to do open science. Sometimes open science is a necessity in certain subject matters. But in many cases it brings you into this dilemma I was talking about. And as long as that's not addressed, we will not get the curve again rising. So that I think is the bottleneck. I think this you can see very well from the monitor. So we have also worked on bringing open science at the global level. So thank you. So I will stay within those 5 minutes. So we have brought it on the global level, notably at the G7 and G20. Statements on open science have been adopted, notably on developing open infrastructures worldwide and on open access. So OECD, same story, so I can stay within the 5 minutes. So let me go to wrap it up a little bit. So I mentioned this already. I think these are now to give you just an outlook on the new framework program, Horizon Europe. You will see that so the new framework actually clarifies and empowers authors more than before. One of the elements is that, of course, the copyright retention remains with the author. This is foreseen in Horizon Europe. This is actually also one of the principles of Plan S. But as I said already before, the Commission already prior to Plan S had these principles set into motion. So this is for us independent of Plan S. So we also want, and that's probably new, we had open access already as mandatory since 2014, but there was no enforcement mechanism. What do you do if people don't comply? So in this case, for the new framework program, people will be threatened with sanctions. We don't like to threaten people. I think open science should be a natural process, but we have decided nonetheless to do this in an exceptional case as it becomes necessary. So to keep, as I said, this is sort of the outlook. This is a sort of scenario on Plan S, if I come back to it. And to conclude with it, there has been a consultation on the so-called 10 principles of Plan S. That consultation was ended, I think, last week, 15 May. There is currently the results on how Plan S will now look and revise is known to me, but it's not open yet. It's on embargo till the end of the month, and so actually only 10 days from now. But this is actually a likely scenario how Plan S will evolve in terms of Horizon Europe, and so that hybrid journals, for example, will be allowed. However, that the cost will not be eligible, because we think that hybrid journals actually don't align with the principles of open access as they should. And that open licenses, so preferably the CC BY licenses, will be adopted. I think this is a fair scenario which I can sketch. So I think I will leave it by that. I hope this was still remain within the time limits, and I give the floor for the chair.
Thank you very much.
And look forward to the discussion.
Now, we have about 5 to 10 minutes for immediate questions. I would like to invite all of you to ask our guest. So who will start?
To break the ice. I'm interested in the alternative metrics which you mentioned. If I understood correctly, there are some working groups working on these metrics. Can you say something more concretely about what are the approaches they are taking? So what is the alternative to the metrics that we have now?
Yes. Maybe I should take that mic. So, because then I can move more freely. I feel I'm freeze there at this desk. So, well, yes, this is found to be a quite difficult topic in terms of finding a solution. I mean, first of all, I think there is quite. Let me just rephrase what, on the basis of these expert group reports, has become sort of consensual among stakeholders. One principle is that if we go to an alternative system, the indicators or the metrics should be both quantitative and qualitative. That's one thing. The second one is that we need a discipline-specific approach in many cases. It's not possible to produce, let's say, a generic indicator. So if I, for instance, in my naiveness, I was thinking a couple of years ago, why we cannot make the indicator how much data is shared and reused. Can we not use this as an indicator, for example? Because that seemed to me makes sense, and you can see how open science evolves in that context. But then a lot of people start protest. No, but because we historians, you cannot say that, and this is not relevant. And in some disciplines, you need to reuse and produce much more data than in other disciplines, and so So in other words. So the arguments I now give and the difficulties I give, for any indicator you produce, you will get such a discussion. So in other words, we need a discipline-specific, or maybe not discipline-specific, but research activity-specific approach. And this is what the second expert group has done. The report is not yet out, but it will be online. Of course, all the results are open, and I'm most... You can send me an email. I can also send the reports directly to you. But I produced actually a model for evaluating and also specific for open science different activities, whether it's mission-oriented research, whether it's qualitative research, whether it's done in particular institutions, and then provide particular toolboxes and indicators specific for that context to be used. So that's a sort of outline. Now one has to still they did not want to go very far in making very concrete indicators because of the fact that we don't have a really open data infrastructure. So all the information you have to make an indicator is always necessarily fragmented. So also in our open science monitor we use indicators, but we know it's not complete. But that's the best what we can do right now. So this is the direction where it will go. But we are not there yet in terms of real solutions. I think some universities, for instance, in the country where I originate from, the Netherlands, they have decided, I think last year, to do away with bibliometrics as such. It does not appear anymore in the research evaluation protocol. Some other university in Belgium, like University of Ghent, for example, recently has decided to use only a qualitative assessment of their researchers to assess them and to make promotions dependable on that. So they did away with indicators all over the board. They also don't want to develop new ones. So you will see that, and I think this is also not an unlikely scenario, that there is now a reaction against all the bad things which are out there, like Juno impact factor and so on, that given the difficulties to have something really alternative, you may have quite a diversity among, since the universities are relatively autonomous in doing these things, to develop their own initiatives, which is an improvement over what we now have. And so like the University of Ghent and Liège are examples of that, I think.
Thank you. We still have time for 1 or 2 questions, so please.
Hi, hello. My name is Miro Pushnik, coming from CTK, Central Technological Library, the University of Ljubljana. My question is regarding, let's say, European Commission in relation to publishers in now upcoming Horizon Europe. Can we expect some more, let's say, formally intensive role of European Commission regarding negotiating with publishers? Because in current situation we have, let's say, very strictly requirements, however, smaller countries struggling to achieve them. And the second question is about the tax law. We've been told about those, let's say, Google punishment by European Commission due to monopoly of in the market. Here is, I think, the same monopoly. What is your opinion about that?
I must say that the European Commission is in itself as an institution not on a negotiation table with publishers. Can you all hear me actually, or because it says an echo? Okay, so the deals which have been made, that is normally always an engagement of universities with publishers. And of course there are initiatives to make these deals more effective by going at the European level, or to have countries who have made successful deals to inform other countries on how to proceed with that. But this is not where the Commission as an institution interferes in. But maybe if I take your question also as an opportunity to be a little bit reflective on what it actually means to go into these negotiations, because what is the pressure or what is the necessity for publishers to change their model? Now, the publishers will only change their model if universities change their reward system. If the universities don't do that, then the publishers can go on with their business. Then complaining about the costs is a little bit strange as a university, because it's also it's in your hands. So in that sense, if you cannot say, okay, we don't change the reward system and then complain about the costs. No, I mean you can also say, well, we make our own online publishing platform, and then bye-bye a publisher. You can do it. So, but okay, this is not, again, I just say this as a personal reflection. It's not something where the Commission engages in as an institution. But I do think that that as you look to the market, of course, there has been alternative business models developed for accommodating open access, and in various ways. Also in various ways on publishing, and I think also in the wider context how we have to change our review system, for instance. There are also different models associated by different publishers, so there is a diversity coming up, which I think is a good thing. We personally, I think, and we need to change our rewards and system, and then the publishers will come along. And then you don't need to do all these difficult deals anymore.
Okay, thank you very much. I was just informed that we are out of time. In about less than 1 hour we have a coffee break, so it's good to be punctual. Thank you very much to our guests for the excellent presentation. And I would like to pass the floor to colleague Jože Gerkeš from the Slovenian Research Agency.
Dobro jutro, dober dan in nasvidenje. Hvala organizatorjem za povabilo in za predlog tovrstne okrogle mize. Sem zelo počaščen, da lahko predstavim profesorja Svinja. Zaprošen sem bil, da uvodni del izvedem v slovenskem jeziku. Ampak bom poskušal kombinirati vsaj dva jezika. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests. I prepared some introduction for announcement of Professor Sweeney, but I think I will skip it, and I'll ask also David that he concludes his presentation in half an hour so that we have more time for the questions, because I see that here's a great interest for the question. So here on the board we do have a cane and another timeline, but this one is from the perspective of the Slovenian Research Agency, and what I want to stress is the timeline with the government of Republic of Slovenia, when the government adopted quite a bold, let's say, national strategy on open access, and we at the agency are here to perform it. But it was not just a question for our agency, it was the case in all European member organizations of Science Europe, and that was the reason why we started with the initiative of Coalition S. Of course, it was a great time with Plan S from European Commission, and we joined the initiative. We were the first signatories. Today we are in expectation of public release of revised Plan S and implementation plan. And as we already heard within the questions, this question of open access is not related just for the publishing itself, but also to the consortia and the policy to the consortia that provide the scientific literature for scientists. And that is, I find it a very important question, because the idea of open access is, however, accepted, and we are already building or having some infrastructures. So these are three questions. Maybe I would like to see that also our guests would address it if possible. The inclusiveness and the complementarity of standard procedures, and about the robustness of this system, and however the elements of responsibility for implementation, because we really have a multi-stakeholder situation, and that's the reason why we also at the agency established a working group at the very operative level. And now I'm coming to our keynote speaker, and David, please join me. Professor David Sweeney is an executive chair of Research England, and he is also a co-chair of the implementation task force of Science Europe, at this moment with orange background, when we are talking about Coalition S. Another co-chair is Jon Arne Rottingen from Norway Research Council. And David, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. It is a privilege to be here. Although I am here as co-chair of the task force, I do have a job. Sometimes remember that I still have a job back in the UK. That job involves visiting universities. In fact, universities all over the world, as we work through some political issues to do with the European Commission. In the UK, it's important that we establish links. And I have visited universities in most of the major countries of the world in the last 20 years, in the last year even. It is delightful to find that you can step on the campus of any university and it feels much more like a global university than just in its own country. The University of Ljubljana is just fantastic. I feel very much at home here. I'm delighted to be here while the celebration towards the 100th anniversary takes place. I'm also privileged to be in Slovenia. I come actually from Scotland, a small part of the UK. I understand the issues of small countries trying to function on the global stage. And you have achieved so much in establishing your country, which of course has an enormous history. It's also a country where culture is at the heart. Indeed, I think literature is probably one of the things that you are most proud of. So to be in a country which has done so much with an intellectual basis is a treat for me. So thank you for inviting me. I would like just to refer to the previous presentation. For me, open science is largely about doing science better. The other reasons are very good. But doing things better involves, to me, having the insights from the whole of the global research community. I think that different cultures and domains do produce different insights, and those of us that are in some of the major research nations need to have our eyes opened more to the societal drivers and impacts of the research which we do as a worldwide effort. Open science, to me, is a significant way of supporting that, and of course I believe in open access as one of the pillars of that. The background has been covered. We go back a long way to 2002. There has been general agreement, I think, for years that open access is a good thing, and I shall not rehearse the arguments. I'm sure you know them well. We have, let us just be blunt, not succeeded with our push for open access. There you see a graph which shows that not only have we not succeeded, we've largely stalled over the last few years, despite the enthusiasm from the Commission and in many of the individual countries. And that's really the reason why I think Plan S is important, because what we have said so far has not achieved the results. We have to achieve the results. I very much appreciated the Dean's earlier point about the description of radical. In some ways it is not radical. It is restating the policies that there are in many countries, including Slovenia. But we have not managed to implement those policies. And the initial thinking behind Plan S is we cannot do it on our own. Even the Commission cannot do it. We perhaps can do it in a broader coalition that reaches beyond Europe to other countries. Some statistics there about global take-up, and also the UK, where we have had great success, albeit mostly with embargoes, which does not mean full and immediate open access. We have made progress, we have not made sufficient progress, and indeed, as you described in 2016, a target was set in 2020 which we will not reach. Well, I think we will not reach. I think we can now make substantial progress towards it by implementing the Plan S proposals, but it is slow going. Mark Schiltz, the President of Science Europe, has set out the motivation for doing it there. I think the key phrase is we have committed to take a decisive change to a decisive step to change the situation. Now, I can say that, the coalition can say that, the individual funders have got to agree, and universities have also got to agree and participate, as have authors and indeed publishers. They have got to change what they do. We have 10 principles, and I'm not going to talk about all 10, and I'm sure you are familiar with many of them, but I would like to point out the very first thing. You've already mentioned it, Rennie. Retain copyright. We want to move from giving our information, as others have described, to the publishers who talk about their authors and who pretend that they run a peer review system, which in fact, of course, they do organise, and I appreciate that they are doing valuable work in much of what they do, but our authors are the authors of the university, not actually of the funders, although of course we commit to support. And it's right that the decisions about how the materials should be used should be taken by authors, or in some countries by the institutions. It depends on the local status of copyright law. I think that is a key step which is often missed. We want the publishers to provide value-added services. We want to pay a fair fee for those value-added services, and I personally do not think that necessarily means a very low fee. I think a fair and reasonable fee is justifiable, but it's for the services they provide, not to take ownership of our information. We are concerned about quality in the second principle, and that very much ties in with the whole open science agenda. We recognise that open access has progressed far quicker in some areas than others, so we've got to take responsibility if we are funders stimulating the system to change for those areas where there are gaps. We have to think about the assessment methods, exactly as already been described. We have to have some words behind fair and reasonable costs so that we can together work that out and listen to publishers. This is not a plan to beat publishers up. This is a plan to challenge publishers to respond and participate collaboratively. And as I shall say shortly, they are actually doing that now in visible ways. In fact, they've been doing that with us for some time in ways that are not be visible, but it is now public. Monographs are really important. I am the largest humanities funder in the UK. I care about that. But we have not yet got to the point where we can form a coherent policy on monographs, and we need to work more closely with the community to do that. We believe in multiple routes, as has already mentioned, repositories and pay-to-publish and open access journals. Now, I already mentioned the hybrid model of publishing is not compliant with the above principles. That principle you may see modified slightly, and of course I can't say what the modification will be in 10 days' time, but you'll be able to work it out from what I say shortly. The funders will monitor compliance. The funders will. There will be no instructions from the Commission that go across the whole of Europe, the whole of Coalition S. Coalition S will not give instructions. This is a responsibility of funders who will learn from each other and work together. But we want the publishers to provide options that we support, and for it to be no challenge at all to authors to comply with their articles. That may sound optimistic. I believe, though, that as we move forward, these things will indeed come together. And in forming the new guidance that we're issuing shortly, we've talked a lot with early career researchers, groups of early career researchers, who we are committed to working with in the future. So what do we aim for? Full and immediate open access. Full means that you can take it forward, typically with a CC BY license, and build on the research that's been done. Immediate means when it's published and not 6 months or 12 months after. We support the new models of academic publishing. Perhaps we didn't say so much about them in the guidance because they are already providing excellent open access options, and the challenges are not in dealing with them. The mention of research assessment, transparent, efficient and fair, a culture for young researchers, but most of all, as I've already said, a collaborative activity with all of the parties engaged. We have 3 routes for compliance. The first route is the traditional open access journal or platform, and the Commission, of course, will be doing more on that. The so-called subscription model with deposit in repositories. In fact, basically the system that works well in the States, but with embargoes, and actually has worked well in the UK with embargoes. We don't believe in embargoes. And one of the current developments in the last 2 weeks, there was an article, maybe even last week, an article in Science magazine where publishers were discussing whether you could use immediate deposit in a subscription journal world, and indeed edging towards a conclusion that this may be possible, or as somebody else has put it to me, there is no evidence at all that immediate deposit leads to cancelled subscriptions. And I've also been talking with Learned Society publishers, some of who already implement immediate deposit, the Royal Society journals, without damage to their business model. So for those who say, and I want to be very clear about this, those who say this is all about so-called gold open access or about pay to publish, that is an option which we think many will want to take up, and indeed traditional open access journals do that already, some of them, although many of them are the publications funded in other ways. This is about 3 routes, each of which has equal importance and value to us. If we have not adequately explained the role of repositories and immediate deposit in the past, you just wait till next week and we'll try to do it in our revised guidance. Not that I'm allowed to say, of course, what's in the guidance. We also, can I just point out there, hybrid journals under transformative agreements, and this indeed was in the last guidance. This is not new guidance, but it will be, I think, very similar. So that principle that we do not support hybrid, perhaps it needs refined to take account of hybrid journals under transformative agreements. What is a transformative agreement? It's a commitment in some time scale to move to full open access and not to increase the costs by charging for both reading and publishing. Now, these transformative agreements, which are registered on a site called ESAC, are a way of overcoming the hurdles that hybrid journals have provided to open access. You've got to pay twice is a really critical argument. We must stop paying twice. We will not pay twice. So that is the issue in transformative agreements. And transformative agreements are transforming to a new system, so we expect to move to full and open access over a relatively short period. Now, again, people have told us in the past this is too difficult, but it is happening all over the world. The Germans are not formally members of Plan S, and that in itself makes a point that members of Coalition S, this is not just about a coalition of funders. This is about a feeling worldwide that this is an objective, and there may be different implementation routes to get there. In Germany, they have the issue that you legally cannot mandate, so they cannot join us. But nevertheless, they are implementing as leaders the very systems that we are calling for. And of course, in the States, where they do things in an American way, the University of California is publicly going for the same kind of transformative agreement that the Germans have achieved, the Norwegians have just achieved with Elsevier, actually. So this is not a pipe dream. This is not something that cannot be achieved. This is something that can be achieved and is being achieved, no additional cost, a transition to full and immediate open access, sitting alongside the repository route. And really the key factor is, how do you do these kind of agreements? Because there is a bureaucracy around them. There is a cost in effort to doing them. Standing together as a coalition is the way to implement those. There's a cost actually also to the publishers, and we will attempt to work with them to provide smooth paths to transition. So 3 routes, equal importance, all of them working now in some parts of the scholarly system and growing. We've commissioned a gap analysis, as I said. We've got to take responsibility for gaps, and we are discussing ways in which we can encourage open access journals, traditional journals, to move to open access mode, and we're also talking about open access platforms. Within the coalition, there's much expertise on this with the Commission, with bodies such as JISC and NWO. There is plenty of experience on the tools that are required to go open access, and a commitment from the funders to ensure that the tools are present. So we do recognise the importance of both fee-free open access journals and platforms, but also that there are some where pay to publish is the route. If that is bound up in a transformative agreement, it means that the author is not paying. It's part of the money flows that are already happening in the negotiation that your libraries, or in some countries, library consortia, are are doing, and it eases the task of the consortia considerably. We do want to have transparency about the costs of the services so that we can talk about what is fair and reasonable, but equally to give our publishers the chance to say which services they think they are offering add value. And of course there's always the question of whether you want all those services. Currently they're bundled, perhaps they will continue to be bundled, but please let us have transparency. Transformational agreements, I've already explained. Transitional agreements towards full open access with copyright, with transparency, aiming for equity across different countries and domains. And open archives and repositories. We think that preprints before peer review are good things for discussion. We endorse them. However, if it is right that peer review adds value to the published output, then it is the peer-reviewed version that should be made available. And that's why we see preprints as complementary alongside the push to full and immediate open access for the version of record or the author-accepted manuscript. And again, there some mention of the tools that you need, Sherpa Romeo, in order to make this all work. Now, you mentioned the number of funders, Rennie. Can I say I'm able today to announce a new member, which is not yet on that list. In the Vinnova in Sweden they joined a while ago, but we have issued a press conference this morning to say that they've joined. You will see there an impressive group of European funders, some funders from other parts of the world. Actually, Jordan is missing. Is Jordan missing? Jordan has joined as well as the African Academy of Sciences, and I believe Zambia is also a member. So we're extending our reach. What, though, about the collaboration with other countries? Actually, in the last 3 months, I have spoken to funders from every major research nation: Japan, Korea, China, Brazil, the States, Canada. Who am I missing? As well, of course, as the European ones, but all around the world. Every single one of them shares the aspiration to full and immediate open access. Some of them want to join. Some of them want to work with us because they see the issues as being slightly different in their countries. I think that the strength of joining together will prove important. But I also think that we cannot wait for everyone to join. We need to push forward with the plan because the publishers are responding. In addition to that Science magazine piece which talks about subscription publishing, you may have noted that Springer Nature have produced a proposal to not only have transformative agreements, which are typically about packages of journals, but transformative journals themselves, and indeed an aspiration from Springer Nature to be viewed as a transformative publisher, where they commit to not charge twice, and they commit to migrate to full and immediate open access. Now, we have been discussing that with them, but we are not commenting on that proposal at this point. I do think, though, Springer Nature said, we are doing this because we want authors to publish in compliant venues. The publishers recognize the necessity of offering options for authors. They do not want to get into a fight which puts authors in a difficult position. We have yet to see whether the Springer Nature proposal or others does prove to be the framework for widespread adoption of open access. I note, if you read the LinkedIn page where Springer Nature published their document, you'll see actually an endorsement from Elsevier and also a very straightforward endorsement, actually, as well as some positive comments from Cambridge University Press. So the idea that all of this is just a long way from realization is not true. We do have to have a time scale that provides the opportunity for engagement with publishers, and that we will make clear next week in announcing our proposals. So I will skip over that because we'll say more about the timescale next week. We want, as public funders, we want the public to be able to read our work. Sometimes that is really very important. In this case, students who just otherwise would not be able to read work because they can't afford to pay subscriptions. In other cases, people with medical conditions who want to study the latest research in order to understand how to support a friend or a relative, or indeed to support their own treatment. These, in principle, are really big issues. I realise that particle physics papers may not be read routinely by the man in the street. They will not be read routinely by me. But the principle really is important, and I think also the principle of working together in a scholarly community. So although we are not saying things immediately about monographs, I don't think that humanities publishing in journals is really very different. We've got to be sensitive to the issues about derivative use of argument and creative outputs, and I think we'll no doubt say more about that. There are issues that are specific to humanities, but in general, I think we want to stick together as multidisciplinary institutions in universities and multidisciplinary funders. So those, I think, are the issues. I've got a list of comments, and I do see Jordan appears on that, so I'm not wrong. Robert Jan has moved to be the president of the Technical University of Eindhoven, and we will have a new champion in due course, and I expect the Commission will also have an open access advocate. But we are working together as a partnership of Coalition S funders. We welcome new members, and we want to push forward. Really, it's delightful to have Slovenia a member and very active in the discussions. We would like to think that we were offering support to you in the implementation path that was to come by being in a larger group. We would also say that we have already learned from talking with your national funder the issues that we may have to word very carefully to support implementation in your country. This will be a success if you are enthusiastic about it, you commit to it, you join with us in addressing the bigger issues already discussed about research assessment, and in your universities the way in which you look at promotion and appointment. I think we can change the method of scholarly communication. We will do so. It is already happening. We just need to do it quicker. The challenge is for you to join us in your support with your national funder. Do you want to do that? Shall we do this together? I hope we will. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your presentation. So it's question time, yes, and I would support more questions than opinions. Of course, opinions are also welcome, but please be short. And please introduce yourself.
Hi, Gregor Majdic from University of Ljubljana. Actually, already wanted to ask that previous speaker, but it's relevant for both. I think one problem with this is publishing costs, which are very high, and we see that the publishers are adapting to this open science policy. This is becoming a multi-million-dollar business for them. For example, Frontiers group of journals, they had published 15,000 articles in 2016, according to them, and that means they earned 30 million euros, which is a lot of money for people. And I think I don't know if it's coincidence, but I think it's unlikely to be just a coincidence in response that most European countries are moving to open access policy. For example, Frontiers against, but I'm not wanting to highlight the Frontiers, other publishers are doing the same. They increase their publishing fees up to 50% for some journals. And for example, Nature Communications open access journals charges 6,000 euros per publishing. So I think these costs are extremely high. You mentioned once that you plan to address this, and I would like to ask what is your plan, how to address this? I'm also an editor of the journal that we publish in Slovenia. It's Impact Factor Journal, International Journal. So I know a little bit how much cost is to run the journal, and I think these prices are very, very high.
Well, first of all, we're going to aim for transparency because not all of the information you've just mentioned is readily available to everyone. Secondly, when we do transformative deals, and technically, of course, it's not Coalition S that does it, it's the university consortia, the deals are being done within the existing cost. So there is, I think, now proof that moving to open access doesn't necessarily bring extra costs. Of course, anybody who is selling a service will try and charge as much as they can for it. First of all, we attempt to address that by transparency. But secondly, the only way that anybody purchasing anything can complain about the cost is by saying no. And you can see that in Germany, the project deal has just said no. It has done a deal at roughly the same price with Wiley, I think, but it has said no to Elsevier, and discussions appear to have stalled. In California, similarly, the university has said no, and at present I read that the different ways there are of getting access to material, there are many legal ways to get access to material, interlibrary loan and so on, is not inconveniencing the academics. I think this is clearly part of a negotiation, and this is not a negotiation that Coalition S can dictate, but it can work with the university consortia, and the European University Association, I think, has about 60 different groups who are working on consortia, and I think you're present in those discussions. So there are ways to do it, but I am not telling you that we are doing this to drive the price down. The primary motivation is full and immediate open access within the existing cost envelope. If you want to focus on driving prices down, then the university consortia are the key players in that.
Thank you. I saw some disagreement also in the audience. Is it correct? Any other question in this topic?
Go on.
Yeah. Okay. No. Aha. Oh, sorry.
Hi. I had a long list of questions before your talk, but you somehow managed to undermine some of them. My name is Ilya Tomanish-Trivunja from University of Ljubljana, but also here as in my other hat, which is the president of European Communication Research and Education Association. And undermining means that you will publish revised guidelines, to which we made some comments in the feedback process. Our main concern was, while we fully support moving to open science, our main fear was that this is somehow driving a wedge between funded research and unfunded research, between institutions that are part of the countries that are part of the coalition and those that are not. Some of the things that also the Dean has mentioned in the introductory speech at the beginning. So my main question is all of this, the implementation of Plan S basically depends on the willingness of publishers to comply. And our main concern was always, what if? What if they will not? What are the implications if this doesn't go as planned? Because, to use a really bad metaphor, this in a way reminds me of the Iraq War, where we have a coalition of the willing and a lot of known unknowns, and you basically ask us to trust you on implementation of this plan while the documents that were publicly available to us were very sketchy, very intransparent, and raised a whole lot of questions. And they're not only for coalition has, but also for national founders. There will apparently be a long and painful transition period in which we think scientists will be very exposed to different frictions. So I'm very much looking forward to reading the comments, and I hope that there will be another feedback.
Well, yes, I sort of feel that we were criticised because we were very clear that we wanted a 2020 date. We did say there was a transition period, but perhaps we were not very explicit about the transition period. We will be more, we have already been a bit more explicit, we will be further, give you further details next week. But if we are being criticised for moving too quickly and then being criticised for a long transition period, we're in a no-win situation. I don't see why a transition period need be painful. I do agree with you that the publishers have got to work with us. I mean, I've been talking to, hundreds of publishers in the last 6 months, but none of that is visible. I know that they all want to maintain their authors. Yes, we could get to the stage where we are, I don't like using the metaphor of war, actually, and that's a bit strong, but we could be at a point where we are considering compliance measures that are very difficult. That is not in the interests of the publishers to lose papers, and it's not in the interests of either the funders or the authors. So I am optimistic that we'll come to a conclusion, and for the first time, as I say, in the last 2 weeks, there is just solid evidence. If Springer Nature say we want to be compliant, then the only issue is, right, how do we get there? Not the principle. If Elsevier say we support Springer Nature's position, again, the argument is how do you get there? Transformative agreements are not painful. I think it's because they are centrally organised, they take all of the pain away from the author. And I think it's interesting that Elsevier currently is not so keen on doing a transformative deal with either Germany or California, but they have done one with the Norwegians. And I think that makes the case that it's not about the principle of doing it this way, it is about negotiating a cost-effective way of delivering, and you then come up against the comments that were being made here of what we can afford. So I do think most of your worries are not well founded, unless indeed we move to very substantial disagreement. But it's not about a gap between Coalition S funders and the rest, because many funders that are not part of the coalition want to sign up to transformative agreements. It is about us standing together on some difficult issues. I'm not going to pretend there won't be some difficult issues, but the alternative is to say the publishers are in control. We can do nothing to fulfill a policy objective that we've had since 2001 and which our governments have had for some years now. Are we going to say we've failed in a policy objective, we've let the publishers take control? That's, I think, an issue for us all to consider.
Thank you. So if there are no more questions in this part, yes, one short question.
So we are talking about the articles, the research that will be done in the future and published in the future. What about the knowledge that we already have and it has been published? So what about the articles that are already published and are now behind the paywall? Is anybody discussing this or students will still have to use the Science Hub, the legal way to get to them? To these articles?
Most of the agreements that are in place do give historic access to material. It's why the withdrawal of access in Germany is only the withdrawal of access to stuff that has been newly published, perhaps since the 1st of January 2018. I'm not sure of the exact dates, but historic stuff is still available, and many publishers have an embargo but make the material available when the embargo finishes. The focus of Plan S is on the future. I do think there will be some legacy issues that we will have to discuss, but that has got to be built into the agreements that university consortia do. We have no lever as funders with the publishers to talk about that, but it's a critical issue. I suspect we'll be asked to come to some appropriate arrangement on that. But that is one for the universities to come to agree with.
Thank you for your keynote, and thank you for answers to our questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for very strict punctuality. So we are going very, very well with time. Now we are having a 30 minutes coffee break, and we begin at in 30 minutes time. So at 20 minutes past 12. Yeah. Thank you.